Hey up and welcome to the Strategy Sessions. My name's Andy Jarvis and I'd like to thank you for coming along and listening today. Today's episode 15, is called Eye-Catching Marketing. Why is it called that? Well, I'm interviewing Mike Follett. Mike runs Lumen Research, a company that uses eye tracking software to check what ads people look at and why they're looking at ads and what they're clicking on. Yes, there's been eye tracking technology used for a while, but this is a great new software that can be deployed across laptops, phones, in different places, and it's built around looking at advertising effectiveness. So I'm not going to tell you too much more, I'm just going to get onto the interview with Mike. One thing I will say is that in the history of this podcast, all 15 episodes, and plus a couple more I've got recorded for the future, never has anyone given me just as many quotable pieces as Mike has done today. If you've seen any of the pre-promo I've done, you'll know what I'm talking about. If not, just get a pen and paper out and have a listen to this episode. There are some absolute golden bits of information which will improve your work doing ads and even just your marketing generally. So please do have a listen and let me know what you think on social. You can find me, I'm at Andy Jarvis, ANDIJARVIS on Twitter. And on LinkedIn, you'll find me there. Please do let me know what you think and contribute to the debate. Anyway, here we go. Let's have a listen to this interview with Mike. Mike, welcome to the Strategy Sessions. It's great to have you with us. How are you today?
Very well, Mike. Andy, very well, very well. I didn't realise you're going to be filming this as well. So I have a pre-corona lockdown haircut. So if anyone's actually on your YouTube channel, you can see that. I feel for your listeners, I'm okay. For your viewers, not so much.
Yeah, don't worry. Look, I've got a beard which looks more like I've been kidnapped for a number of years. So it's the lockdown world, isn't it? So for anyone listening, we're recording this in December. It's a couple of days before Christmas, and we're looking a little bit hairy if you're not watching this on YouTube. Mike, tell everybody what your company is, Lumen, and give us a little bit of that introduction as to what you do.
So Lumen is an attention technology company. We've developed some software that turns your computer or your phone's webcam into a high quality eye tracking camera. And that means that we can go and recruit people anywhere in the world. You recruit 100 or 1,000 people and say, please download our software. And then we can observe not just what they could see on their phones or their computers, but what they do in actual fact look at. Because people are really good at ignoring things. And just because you can see something doesn't mean you will see it. So we collect all that data about your digital advertising or about your site design or about your TV ads or whatever, and understand what people actually have been looking at rather than what they say they've been looking at.
Fantastic. So this is our first real step into research in the Strategy Sessions podcast. We've not really talked about it in any great depth. So to have a whole show talking about this it's fantastic. And I'm really, really keen to get into this. So how did the company start? Because eye tracking software, there's been bits of eye tracking studies out there for a little while. So how did you get into this and why did you think, let's go into this sector?
Well, I started my career in advertising at DDB, and one thing I noticed again and again and again throughout my entire 15 years of working there is that no one knows how big a logo should be on an ad. And everyone's got an opinion. Should it be half the size of the ad? Should it be tiny? You have these logo shrinking creatives and these logo expanding clients, and everyone's got a bloody opinion about it. And if you do lots of research with people, you're going to ask them, you're going to have a focus group, or you go, which one do you think should be bigger? Everyone's got an idea, in the focus group or in the questionnaire. I think it should be like this because of this reason. I think it should be. The thing is, though, that it doesn't really matter what people think they think. It's what they actually do that matters. Mm-hmm. So I had used eye tracking, which has been used in the user experience, the UX environment for quite some time. I'd used that and I thought, well, perhaps we could, instead of doing it for websites, do it for advertising and for print advertising just to begin with. And so to resolve one of these questions, while I was working for Tesco's ad agency, we got together about 100 people and asked them to read a newspaper, and half the sample saw the ads with the big logo, half the sample saw the ads with the small logo, and we took the findings back to the client, And instead of saying, well, I think this, and it stands to reason that it should be, I just went, no, B is better than A. Big logos. There we are.
There you go.
Bosh.
So you're showing your age a little bit, obviously, because it was tested on newspapers. So you must be at least 120 something.
Around about that,
Around
yeah.
about.
No,
So I do have some younger listeners who'll be like, newspapers, what are they?
You see, that's the thing. It started off. I mean, the thing about eye tracking is that the technology's been around for a while, but eye tracking is much easier to do, at least initially, if you have static things to look at. If you know that what everyone's looking at, and that's static, and all you have to do is measure their eyes and where that's moving. That's how we started. But I think at the end of the first meeting, this is when I was working at an ad agency, and I'd got this technology sort of off my own back to do this weird piece of research for the clients. At the end of the meeting, the guys at Tesco said two things. One is they said, God, this is really interesting. Let's do more of this, which made me think I should ditch my career at an ad agency and set up Lumen.
Sensible.
And the second thing they said is, yeah, but who reads newspapers? Can't we do this for computers and for phones? And so already before I'd started the company, clients were asking for something better than I had.
Yeah.
That's been my experience for the last 7 years. Clients constantly saying, yeah, I mean, yeah, that's good, but what about this?
It's you shouldn't ever really use fictional TV programs to quote and quote them as philosophy. But there is a great line in Game of Thrones, which is everything that comes before "but" is usually a lie. It's like, oh yeah, that's great, but okay. So yeah, so very true with your experience.
Well, it's the other interesting thing about that. I think not only is that it what I have found in starting the company is that I thought that the company was always going to be about creative stuff, and again, the clients have always been ahead of me in their requests and their demands. They want more technology, and that's been sort of client-led innovation. Wouldn't it be great if you could do this, or wouldn't it be? But also, clients are the ones who come up with the really interesting questions. So I thought that I was going to spend my life saying that big logos should be better than small logos. But over time, in actual fact, what's happened is that clients have come to us with tons of interesting questions that I could never have thought of myself. And that's led the development of the company.
So let's just jump back a little bit. So back to the very early days with the newspaper ads and where you started from. Because in ad land, there are some kind of things that creatives just know to be true, allegedly. Number of words you have to have on a billboard headline, no more than 6, I think, is it?
5 or 6, yeah.
5 or
We've got
6, yeah.
lots of good evidence now to support that.
There you go. So number of words on a billboard, where you should put the product versus the text. Is it? And again, I'm not a creative, so I don't know. But you'd put the product one side, the text the other side, because people read from this. And in website land, that people read in an E apparently, and all of these things, which are some based on greater or lesser evidence, depending on who you believe and where they came from. Is this what you were up against? And is this what you were almost initially setting up to prove or disprove, whether the founding principles of design were correct? That was the starting point for where you were looking at.
Yeah, I think it was a bit like that. There is an awful lot of sort of folk wisdom, lore, from the creative side, and there's also equally a whole load of assumptions that go into it from the client side as well. That nothing matters unless people know that the ad is from your brand. It's all very well. Don't spend all this money advertising something that could be from anyone. And what I suppose. So yes, definitely, we were in the business of trying to prove empirically which of these sorts of bits of wisdom were actually true and what were just sort of old wives' tales or so. But I think a little bit more was just the process of decision making. What tends to happen in ad agencies quite a lot is there's a strong hierarchy or authority. And the decisions are sort of made almost politically.
Mm-hmm.
In most big ad agencies, you have a man, and it is almost exclusively men at the top as creative directors, and they are the ones who have the ideas and the ones that, and then surrounding them, you've got the planners what do you have, junior creatives, and then you have the planners and the suits who are there to justify
Mm-hmm.
the thoughts and the wisdom of this great man, usually. And his authority is usually based almost sort of shamanistically on, well, I just know what great design is. And then, and they'll
Which is built out of some successes historically, would it
well,
be?
maybe sometimes, but sometimes not, I think. But it leads to a style of arguing which is not evidence based, but is instead based on authority. I know what I'm talking about, and that is a very dangerous position to be in, because that person comes up against a client who is ultimately paying the bills.
The golden rule.
You
Who
have to
has the
follow
gold
the
excellence?
money there.
Yeah.
And so if he or she doesn't agree with that sort of authoritarian argumentative style, then you're in an absolute impasse.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is usually you can go into research or something, or let the researcher, and you have something called uh, agency version of ad and client version of ad,
Mm-hmm.
which is another way of saying losing version of ad and winning version of ad. That now it's a tremendously demoralizing way of making a decision, because it disempowers everyone around you, because you just have the authority of this man versus the desires of the client, and there's no, they can butt heads. But it also means that it's very difficult to build up a corpus of wisdom and a corpus of knowledge that's based on any evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people will say, well, I think the logo should be big, and other times people say they think the logo should be small. And in this instance, you go, why is that? And you don't have an awful lot of evidence to say one way or another, because any evidence like that would disempower the creative process. You go,
So
well, in
what I
this
find.
instance, I think it's this. Now, I think is not a very good way of justifying things. So I think that the great thing about eye tracking is that it gives you this really powerful, rich, quantitative evidence. You go, 18% of people did this, whereas 42% of people did that. But the mode of doing the research is almost entirely passive. Instead of asking people, I will talk about it in a second. Most people ignore most ads most of the time, and people just glance at things.
Mm-hmm.
When you're reading the paper, when you're online, and because of this reality, because people don't really care about ads. Because of that reality, the guy in the turtleneck jumper, that is
The beard.
right, because what he ends up saying a lot is keep it simple, make it funny, make it beautiful. No one has to look at this stuff, and it turns out a lot of his um, intuitions are exactly right, and we should be taking his advice, but not because he says so, but because the evidence supports his contentions.
What I find really interesting there, so DDB for people listening, is kind of where Doyle Dane Bernbach is now. In fact, it's DDB Adam and Eve now. Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. So still one of the country's biggest and best agencies. And DDB has a history that goes back forever. They've had the Volkswagen account almost since time began, made one of the ads which is universally recognized as one of the best ads ever made, the VW Think Small ad, back in the 50s.
Yeah, 50s and 60s. That's when, and written, but I don't think Bill Bernbach wrote the ad, but he certainly was the head of the creative department when it came out.
So this is, I mean, and just quick segue into this, because it's a great line, but obviously very clearly of its time, which came from a Jewish guy talking about the VW and how it became popular in America and how great that ad was. And yes, this line doesn't work in 2021, but it did work in the 50s. So just excuse me for a moment. It sold a Nazi car in a Jew town.
Yeah.
Was the line that they used. Now that is, you wouldn't use language like that these days, but just shows you the impact. Bearing in mind, this is 10 years after the Second World War finished, or just over maybe 15 after the Second World War finished. and the Volkswagen, people's car, the German car is being sold hand over fist in New York because of this ad. And it's the ad that started the mythology. So to come back to where we were, it's really interesting to hear the problems in the creative process, even at what is regarded around the world as one of the greatest creative agencies about.
Oh, well, I don't know. I don't want to say that there are problems in the creative process per se. I think DDB has a long and amazing tradition of especially at DDB London, or Adam and Eve as it is now, of creating the concept of planning. Where you sit and work out exactly what consumers want, and then come up with, you sort of measure twice and cut once.
Yeah.
And that hopefully primes the creatives with exactly the right area to go into. And obviously still they have to come up with new and interesting thoughts that haven't been thought, that wouldn't occur to a sort of rational sort of mind. You have to have that sort of right brain sort of inventive thinking, and in coming up with ideas there are always going to be disagreements, and any new thinking should provoke a bit of an argument, otherwise it's not there. And any new thinking should, I suppose, make you feel a bit uncomfortable. I mean, can you imagine trying to sell, Think Small or Lemon or like you say, it's trying to sell a German car in a Jewish town. That it's unlikely that research would have got you out of that. You have to have a leap of faith there. So any agency worth their salt is going to have arguments, and that I think is totally okay. And that's what I enjoyed about my time at DDB. But I think what when you've had the same argument for 10 years in a row, and it's like a toss of a coin. Sometimes it's black is white, and sometimes white is white, and sometimes the logo should be big, and sometimes you realize how political most decision making is,
and finger
and finger, and that can be, for people who work in the industry, you very, very demoralizing, because you realize that after 10 years of working in the industry, you haven't actually learned anything. All you've learned is that it's a crapshoot, that sometimes the ideas come and sometimes they don't, and sometimes you can sell them into the client, but then and you go, well, where is my body of knowledge? Because that body of knowledge is super, super important for helping you sleep at night.
So the debate about marketing being an art or a science started roughly in the 50s. The Americans were codifying marketing from the 30s, and then this debate kicked up. I think it was Harvard Business School initially, about, is it an art, is it a science, where does it sit? And I think the needle was firmly in the art direction. Probably all the way through until the explosion of digital. There was eye tracking and things, but most of the science was post-campaign. I think is probably the best way to think about it. Yes, there was pre-stuff and there was surveys and focus groups, but the hard and fast evidence often came after you'd taken the leap of faith. Did it work? What did it sell? How many people? All that sort of stuff. I think the needle had moved with digital analytics and things like that, moved sort of into the middle. And then maybe in the last 10 years kind of went all the way towards the science bit, where the digital marketers and the performance marketers and data scientists felt like they were taking over the discipline. It feels like we're kind of moving back towards the middle a little bit with creatives sort of reasserting their push at this, and actually people taking the data and using it to improve the creative, as opposed to it just the data being the answer to itself. I think it was David Abbott who said about digital, shit that arrives at the speed of light is still shit, which is a fantastic way of putting it. But I think what's happening now is, and to come back to your product, is that we're using the data to make better decisions, not to lead the creative process almost, but to give it the full picture so people can make better decisions. Is that what clients are coming to you for?
Absolutely. I think that I mean, to build on what you were just saying there, I think there has been an idea of marketing science for a long time, and Claude Shannon, and but it used to be so expensive to get the data, doing research was really expensive. And then tracking sales afterwards was really, really hard work. And so people did take it very, very seriously, but it was only open to the biggest and most well-funded companies to be able to. Now it's really easy to see how many people have downloaded your podcast, if they have listened right towards the end, where did they go afterwards, did they, you in your business and with your clients can give your clients this amazing sort of granularity of data for, can in the 50s that would have cost millions of dollars to be able to, and you've got it all at your fingertips. So what happens is, because you've got the data, the next question that clients ask is, so what have I learned here, and what does it? And so as marketers, we've been primed to go, well, this is really interesting because I can predict definitely that this is what's happened the last 10 times. So if we do this and we use this as a leading indicator, this will definitely happen again. Again, because data is so plentiful and so cheap, we think it must be predictive, and the answer is it is to an extent, but there's still an awful, the role for creativity, for saying something new or in a different way, that hasn't gone away. It's in actual fact, the data should be able to tell us exactly the contribution of these of the creative. I mean, for instance, one of the things that we at Lumen, we test thousands of ads hundreds of ads every week, thousands of ads probably every month, to help people understand what actually gets people to notice and what gets people to remember ads. And from that, you get a whole bunch of sort of general learnings about how advertising in general works, and then very specific learnings about how your ad in particular it works. And what we can confidently say is that art directors are underpaid and copywriters are overpaid, because the average dwell time with most ads or digital ads is about 2 seconds. When people are online, your average dwell time is around about 2 seconds. What you've got here is a poster.
And is that, when you say digital ads, do you mean banner ads on
banner ads, outstream video, everything basically. Your average dwell time with a YouTube ad, a 15-second YouTube ad, is 4.9 seconds, which is almost like a TV ad. But everything else, everything on Instagram, everything on Facebook, video or static, everything, teeds, the whole lot, about 2 seconds. And you may have made a TV ad and stuck it on Facebook. But just because you think it's going to be used like a TV ad doesn't mean people are in charge. And when you're on your phone, you're flicking through like it's like a one-armed bandit, isn't it? Like one of those slot machines going around. That you are not so weird. That's how everyone else does it too. Now that tells you something massively important, which is that Facebook isn't like TV. And it's certainly not like print advertising. Facebook is not a video platform. Facebook is an out-of-home platform. What you need to do is think like a poster. Now that is a big empirical learning that we can take to TBWA or DDB or Ogilvy or something, and go, whatever you think, this is how people actually engage with the ads, and that's probably sort of
I don't want to point the finger. I don't know anyone who works at Guinness, not anymore anyway. But Guinness make great TV ads, but they up until I don't even know if they still do. But in the early days of digital, they would push out TV ad just be dumped on YouTube as a pre-roll or Facebook, isn't it? And you're like, you've spent all this money on this great ad, and you just dump the same thing on Facebook. Now, coming from a digital background, so I started in digital agencies. We would. Our feeling was that you had to capture people
on the skippable YouTube ads, you had to capture people with something interesting before you could skip. Whereas a TV ad typically told a story to an end, to a reveal at the end. I was like, well, no one's going to stay for that reveal. You need to almost think of it the other way around. And that was the advice we'd give to people.
Absolutely, it's not a murder mystery. No one's hanging around to reveal. Oh my God! It turns out it was a beer brand. You know, it's you know the our data, I think, is really, really important in, you know, so your question was about, does the data help support creativity? And you go, well, what we do is we sort of tell creatives especially how people actually engage with their stuff. And if you know that really you're not meant to be doing a TV ad on Facebook, really it's a poster on Facebook, then that puts it in a different box. And then you can make the best poster that, you know, it can be a moving digital poster or something, but it's essentially, you go, right, I've got three or 4 seconds max here to play with. Let's not do the murder mystery. Let's not even think about it like a TV, you know, piece. Let's think of it like a poster. And then once you've got your head into that headspace there, then you can make the most amazingly creative poster there ever was. But you know, that's where I think the data supports creativity. It helps you say, what game are we playing here? What are the rules of this game? And then you can have all the debates you like about making the world's best poster, you know. And I think, like I say, I'm a very textual, verbal sort of person. I know what I like when it comes to pictures. I'm just not very good at making them. So I am absolutely in awe of the art directional side of it. But that, I think, is that's the big learning from our research, which is that you know, if you were to invest in the money, invest in the pictures rather than the words.
I want to dive in. I'm going to take the clip for show promo where you said art directors are underpaid, copywriters are overpaid, and I'm going to put your address on it as well, so copywriters can send you some incredibly well-written hate.
Well-written, yeah, exactly. Abuse, whereas I might get some sort of simple thumbs up from gifs and pictures from art directors.
So I worked with a well-known high street brand who make greetings cards. I can't say who, but I worked with this company. One of the things that struck me when in a meeting with them, they were talking about greetings cards and why people buy them. And their view on it was, their research had showed them that the picture made you pick it up. The words on the inside made you buy it. So the picture stopped you. You were like, oh, yeah, that looks great for my gran. But when you opened it and it went, Happy Christmas, you old sod, you put it back down. You went, I can't give that to my nan. And then you'd pick another one up and the words would say, you are a light of my life. Thank you for being. And you go, oh, that's perfect for my nan. And you buy it. And I took that when people say, oh, like, what about social media content? That is my advice now. The picture will stop people. The words will make them buy. So when you're scrolling, no one stops for the words when they're scrolling. Like you said, the social media companies and people are measuring scrolling in meters per day or per scroll or whatever. Yeah. So you're scrolling through and you go, oh, click to read the words. If the words aren't there or the words are crap, you're just not buying. So, you know, is it...
I speak hyperbolically there. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, you know, you have to have something to sell. You know, you're adverting people's attention to something. You have to, you know, say, well, what is it? And the way you say it, and the offer and the positioning is all tremendously important. But if anything, you know, if anything, I've learned over the last 7 years is that most people ignore most things. Getting people to, you know, to spend some time is quite an interesting language there. You know, in English, you know, we use lots of economic metaphors for attention. You spend time with people. You give them that time. If you're not careful, you'll waste people's time. Like, attention is this resource. The first thing to do is to get people to stop and stare. You know, we were talking about Bill Bernbach.
Yeah.
You know, one of his Bill Bernbach famous quote for bloody everything. He said, "You can't sell a man who isn't listening." And what he means, like, you have to get people to listen first, and then you can sell them. And I think it's that order. You have to get people's attention so that you can do the sales. But even within that, you have to be worth their time. You have to earn their attention. So this is why copywriting is so important, because you have to get people's attention. Yeah,
As
but then you
we've
have to.
talked about with attention,
People
though,
will
the
give up
copywriters
if
aren't
it's
listening
boring.
anymore, Mike. The copywriters aren't listening anymore. They're just going to come with a
God, yeah,
pitchfork
this is.
and burn it down.
Yeah, but they're the subs in most relationships. The DOMs are the design. I'd be more scared of the designers, to be honest.
There's another clip for the promo anyway.
Yeah, exactly. The copywriters are all mouth. You do have to earn people's attention, and again, I think that's the other big thing that we've learned from this. No one has to look at any of this stuff. When you make advertising or marketing or anything, you are very interested in it because either it's your brand or your client. Your mortgage depends on this. So of course you read everything. In ad agencies, I can remember if you made a typo in the ad, and the typo was bad enough to invalidate it, the agency would have to pay for that media space. We took it on as a responsibility. So you'd read it, all these ads with amazing attention to detail. And because we're professionals, you want to take it seriously and all that. This is not how people look at ads. You are not normal. As a marketer, you are weird, and you sort of forget that your own experience and your lived experience with your advertising is not like how other people do it. Most people are just skimming through Facebook, and flick through if back in the 18th century, when you think I come from, people read the newspaper. People read the news, not the ads. No one there used to be newspapers called the Leeds Advertiser or something like that, because they were full of ads. But no, we have Google for that now. So newspapers are for news, and that's why. So you have to remember how unimportant advertising is. And it's because advertising is so unimportant that creativity is so important. Because people don't have to look at this, that's why beautiful advertising, simple advertising, clever advertising, funny advertising is worth so much more than ugly, boring, tedious ads. I mean, you talking about like the research thing, and digital advertising. I think one of the things that digital advertising has helped us understand, I think now, because of lots of fraud and stuff like that, the value of this is going away. But one of the things is to talk about the value of the media. I have delivered 18 ads to this, and also of targeting. Not only have I delivered 18 ads, but they are to dog owners in South Wales, who are, and are they really? Isn't that probably? But anyway, let's, and with GDPR, all of that's going away anyway. But anyway, it's all about the media and the targeting. But what we always forget is that you have tons of ads to the right person. But if the ads are crap, then it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter how many impressions you buy. It's the impression you make that counts. And that's the only thing that really matters at the end of the day. So we've become obsessed by the media and by the targeting. But attention is a function of media and targeting and creative. And it's those three things working together that lead people to pay attention, to remember stuff, and then to buy it later.
Yeah, the media and the messaging working together. Brilliant. So I want to talk about attention and the attention economy. I think you mentioned about how a lot of these words are now borrowed from economics, whether it's nudging or friction and things like that. So we drag all these terms in. What are you seeing? You said you work with Facebook and people. What's the focus? What's the drive in those products at the moment? What are they looking at?
Well, this idea of the attention economy has risen in the last couple of years or so. I think it's off the back of some work. It's used in quite a negative way. And the thesis is it comes from a chap called Tristan Harris. That's how the Americans pronounce it. And an academic at Harvard called Susanna Zuboff. Tristan made a lot of money working for Google, and then he banked all the money, and then had a road to Damascus experience where he realized that Google via YouTube was funding hate, because it would promote videos that you demanded your attention. And the more extreme the videos were, the more attention you gave, and therefore you watch the ads and next to these increasingly horrible videos, and people would go down the Google hole there. And I think this is probably true. And he's now dedicated his life to resolving this. He hasn't given the money back, though, that he made from Google. So he's. I wonder quite how morally pure this man is. And then Susanna Zuboff, who's an academic at Harvard, wrote a book called The Surveillance State, or something, I forget. It's just. I mean, philosophically quite naive, I think. And then she has said the same thing, which you have this algorithmic approach to Facebook or Google that sucks people in and makes people, shows people videos and content that they think they'll really, really like, so that you can show ads that you can learn more about people and be better and better targeted. And that this is the sort of thing that is leading to the extremism online, that you go, where do you get your news from? You're from Facebook, and suddenly you get down this sort of weird anti-vax sort of pro-Trump sort of hole, or you go into I suppose lots of other people would go that lots of things that I see is are similarly extreme, but perhaps from a left-wing point of view. So that's the idea of this attention economy, that these companies are incentivized to show more and more extreme things, and parcel people into smaller and smaller groups of highly targeted individuals, so they can sell more advertising against it. I think we take a slightly broader view of things. Those things may well be true for YouTube and Instagram and Facebook. I don't know enough about it, and there may well be. If that is the case, they can be resolved by either legislation or by policies at Facebook and Google. And I think both Facebook and Google are taking steps to address those sorts of things. I take a slightly broader view, which is not necessarily a pejorative idea of the attention economy. What Hunt and Zuboff are talking about, they use it in a very narrow sense. I think you can take this analogy of the attention economy much further. Attention is a finite resource. You're either looking here or you're looking there, or I suppose when it comes to a podcast, you're either listening to one thing here or you're not. It's not quite binary, but it's pretty bloody binary, to be honest. If you're focusing on one thing, you're probably not focused, and you can have rather distracted attention, I suppose, which is a bad thing. But in general, you're either looking at one thing or not. And that means you can start using the language of classical economics to go, well, what makes people look at one thing rather than another? And at Lumen, we do an awful lot of that sort of measurement. We work out, well, what is it that people look at? You have selective attention. So, what do you select to look at? And we find that people, look at stuff. Advertising is just one of the things that they could look at. There are trees, there are houses, there's the newspaper, there's other stuff on Facebook that they can look at. So they're constantly making a calculation about whether or not to look at stuff. Is this worth my time? Is this worth my advertising? Almost invariably fails that test, because it's not very beautiful, it's not very interesting, it's not very valuable, and so this is why you have to do stuff that's worth looking at, and you have to employ the art directors, but also I suppose probably give some money to the copywriters as well, to generate something that's worth looking at, because no one has to look at this stuff. Now, I think that is quite a big shift in people's marketers' understanding of what their job is. If you think that your job is to deliver a message, almost like a war, like a missile, like a warhead going over, then you say, well, you use quite a lot of these military language, penetration and bombarding, and you have objectives and strategy and stuff like that. You sort of think that you're in charge sending these messages out, but in actual fact, it's not like that at all. It's the other way around. It's much more like seduction. You as a marketer have to appear interesting and beautiful, and you have to seduce your audience, to say, please look over here. We're much more like flowers trying to attract bees, or than generals trying to achieve our sort of military objectives. And I think that that's really, really important, because you realize that in this attention economy that we're competing for attention against loads of other more interesting stuff. And when you understand that, you end up producing totally different marketing. Instead of obsessing about that fourth bullet point, you go, is that the sort of thing that's going to get people to pay any attention at all? And quickly the calculus changes.
You need a bit of humility, I think, in advertising, which isn't necessarily a quality that you would associate with kind of the art director, creative director parody in your mind. But I think in my experience, it is rapidly increasing in that, because once you understand that nobody really cares about what you do other than you and your clients, then and their competitors, I suppose. Once you understand that, it does bring you at this from a different angle. How do we make them care? Instead of let's tell them all these wonderful things about, you're right, it becomes much more of a two-way street, really.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And I think, one of the people I think is, something like Mark Ritson, the what is it, academic, and now is a sort of a consultant and trainer. One of the things he talks about all the time is that you are not your target audience. They're busy mums, they are distracted lads, they're they've got other things going on in their lives. So how do you fit into their lives rather than how do they fit into your business plan? That's the question that we should be asking. And I think that this language you used there, a bit of humility, I think again that's it can be quite a hard word to say. I mean, I'm a professional. I've been to university. I don't need any humility. I just want to be. In actual fact, if you realise what the true task is, then that can be a spur to amazing creativity. And it helps. It helps you understand what the task. Just as I was saying beforehand, Facebook ads are not videos; they're posters. Ads are not messages going out, they're invitations to come in. And if you think of it like that, then you produce totally different ads, and you also have totally different arguments with your client or with your agency. Instead of saying, why haven't you delivered bullet point 4, you have a joint conversation about how can we earn people's attention, how can we make this worthwhile.
So to go back to Lumen and what you do as an organization, do you have any plans to get earlier into the creative process? And you may already do this, so excuse my ignorance if you do, but you talk about testing ads. It's almost as if this has been made, it comes to you, you test it, and then send it back for improvement. But actually, all of this insight is needed earlier in that process. They need it before they start. So do you do that in the, I hate the word ideation. It makes me feel dirty. The idea phase.
That needs better copywriting, doesn't it? That.
Oh God, yeah. It's just one of those awful. It's like ideation. Is that even a word? It's like Americans use normalcy. I'm like, what? Normalcy? Stop it, will you? Ideation does the same to me. It makes me itch. But are you doing work to get your insight into that idea stage, or are you just sort of a testing ads as they've sent to you?
Well, we do two big things. So the first thing is yes, absolutely. And what we tend to do is start the process by try and download what little wisdom we have ahead of time. There's no point in us testing a load of ads and us coming back to go, to go, well, you spent all this money testing the ads, and as we would have told you anyway, these are far too long, or but I still want paying. So much better is to run some workshops beforehand and say things like, think like a poster, or earn attention, or the sort of 2-second rule of like,
Have we just given away all of your training
oh,
costs?
no. I think it's important to try and, I know I'm on a mission to try and make marketing more effective. So the more people know this upfront, the better. So yes, we try and sit down and have sorts of workshops and training sessions, which almost always go the same way. The initial 20 minutes is really awkward, where you go, who the hell is this coming in to tell me that
With his unkept hair and his
with his straggly beard, and he was a planner rather than a strategist rather than a creative, and he keeps on saying that art directors are overpaid and copywriters are underpaid. So there's always an awkward 20 minutes at the front where you go, who the bloody hell are you? And then you talk through some of the principles, and some people that it's sort of very resistant. But what we said at the start, creatives know their stuff. We pay these people because they have skills and a way of thinking that the rest of us do not have. They think in a different way, and their intuitions are largely right. The reason why you want to make your ads beautiful and is because no one has to look at these things. It's not precious creatives being, I want to be at art school rather than, they're not. It's not that creatives are failed artists. It's because they know that beauty is an essential part of getting attention in the first place. When you say try and keep your headline short, like a haiku, that's not because art directors are precious and they really like to be poets, but instead they ended up with. It's because they know that quicker is better. You have to find the right words in the right order, and elegance and simplicity really do make a difference. So these people are right. The evidence, though, helps them make that argument. Instead of just saying I'm right because I am, because I went to Luton or Falmouth, and because I am rich, and because I am a man, and because I'm an art. Instead of leaning on their authority, you can have some actual evidence to it. So hopefully start off by that sort of stuff, and then people go away and hopefully come up with lots of different ways of doing it, and we can help and support there. We have a whole load of people that we call attention consultants that work with agencies and clients to do that, and then testing and improving and learning on the creative side. But that's only half the story, because the other half of the story is the media itself. Like I said before, attention is a function of the media, the targeting, and the creative. We often forget about the creative in digital marketing, but we sometimes forget about the media as well. Perhaps I think the other big failing in digital marketing recently has just been the assumption that so long as you put the ad in front of the right person at the right time, they will buy the product. And I'll say so because my attribution model, my attribution model says so, and therefore GDPR is making all that go away, and not a moment too soon, because that is largely bollocks. In actual fact,
there's another quote.
You see, words are quite important, aren't they? I mean, perhaps I'm my own copywriter here. I mean, certainly if you look at me in this video, I'm not my own art director, I assure you. But the digital marketing has been obsessed by targeting. And that has led to all of this last click attribution, with all these digital marketers claiming, oh, it's me. I was the one that won it, and all of that sort of trying to be the last possible ad before the click or the sale is made, and then claiming that sale for yourselves. That is why digital advertising doesn't work. And talk to Les Burnett, talk to Mark Ritz and talk to Byron Sharp, the returns on digital marketing are visible in comparison to the bigger, in talking about the long and the short of it, the long is more important than the short of it.
I'm working on a presentation for a conference, which the working title is "Performance Marketing is not the same as marketing performance."
Well,
and
I think
it's
good
in that
copywriting.
field. It's for a PPC conference, so I'm expecting to get heckled and having raw tomatoes thrown at me. That's the point. I mean, luckily, last click attribution is becoming less and less popular. The reason it's still there is that nobody really knows what to replace it with. And you go, oh well. And
I think you should
to the old ways of marketing, where there is a better way, but it just costs an awful lot of money to do. Whereas we can do like last click attribution, like there you go, there's your figure. So,
and I think, I think what you should be looking at is incrementality, incremental sales. So what would I have been getting anyway? And then I did this ad campaign, and how many more sales did I get from the base rate? And what we find is that attention data that we produce at Lumen predicts incremental sales. So that, like I said, creative is super important. Targeting is important, but is going away. So what have you got left? You've got media. And it turns out that the size of your ad, the shape of your ad, the position on the screen, and the domain on which it's served makes a massive difference. Ads on the Times or the Guardian or the Mirror get tons more attention than the same ads on eBay or weather.com. Where you place your ads has a massive effect on whether or not anyone notices them.
Ooh.
Because when people are reading the newspaper or they're watching a video or something, they're prepared to look at ads, or they might give it. They still only glance at them. Mm-hmm. They don't necessarily. But when you're on National Rail Inquiries, which is one of the biggest sites, or used to be before COVID, God in heaven. But or when you're on eBay or something like that. When you're on eBay, you're looking for a pair of trainers, and you have very focused vision, and everything else around. It's a bit like advertising inside Sainsbury's or inside Tesco. Why you don't put posters there? Because people are shopping, or when you're on National Rail Inquiries, you're trying to work out how to get to Milton Keynes, and the last thing you want is to be told about some new and exciting offer from Apple or whatever.
Yeah.
Whereas other websites, you're in a far more receptive mood. So what we also do at Lumen isn't just optimize the creative for attention, but optimize your media planning for attention, helping you buy big enough ads that are going to get noticed in the right location. And that is another way digital marketers can get to this sort of incremental sales. Anyone can basically buy you a load of clicks. Mm-hmm. Through fraud or just through these clever targeting technologies to make sure that you're the last one there. That isn't marketing. That in actual fact is I think that's probably value dilutive. You're paying a marketing agency to make you less money than you would have anyway. Instead, what you need is value accretive marketing, stuff that helps you get sales that you wouldn't have got already. There's no point in doing marketing if you're just going to get the sales you would have got already. What you want is more sales from people that are strangers or from people you don't know, or people you're not retargeting. Now, if that's what you want, attention's the way to get it.
There's two questions, and I want to just quickly ask one about that ad placement that you mentioned, but then I want to come back to talk about getting new customers and that incrementality. So have you looked at the impact of the brand of the domain? So if you mentioned the Guardian, the Mirror, as opposed to fluffypuppydogwalking.com or whatever, have you sort of been able to test for that as part of it? So it's not just what they're reading, it's the brand and the trust factor they put into it?
Yeah, there's some things there. We have done quite a lot of work. We do quite a lot of work with the magazine marketing body called Magnetic, and we've done some stuff for Newsworks. The benefit of putting your ads on big, well-known sites is in in part down to the fact that big well-known sites are very well laid out. Lots of white space around the ads. You read the words, and then there's a massive great space, and then your ad pops out and see it, and there's nothing else there. The worst thing you can ever do, by the way, is put your ads on a page where there's 2 other ads.
Okay.
Have.
Hold on, I'm going to sing a theme tune, and you can give us that bit again. It's time for a TOPTIP. Go, Mike.
The worst thing you can do is put your ad on a page where there's 2 other ads, because you need one at a time. You need fewer, better ads, and it's worthwhile paying a lot more for sort of soulless positioning because people can't see the wood for the trees. So all these things look cheap. You go, oh, well, the CPMs are fantastic, but then again, your 6 ads appearing at the same time, so they're all shouting for your attention. And remember, you have to compete for attention, not just. It's hard enough competing for attention against the news.
Mm-hmm.
If you have to compete for attention against 5 other brands and the news, bloody hell, is it any wonder none of this stuff works? Yeah. So much better is to but in addition to that sort of soulless factor, which really is worth paying for, I do think there's a factor about how engaged people are with the content. So I haven't seen the evidence. Well, I don't know. We're the only people who have got the evidence, so no one has seen the evidence. But so, okay, right. Well, I haven't seen it, and so no one else has seen it. I don't know if there's an awful lot of value to the trust factor myself. Probably a bit. Okay. But what there definitely is committed readers of a site engage much more with the content, and because they engage with the content, they engage much more with the ads. So what you want to do, so fluffydog.blogspot.com may be, well, maybe it sounds like a sort of a Russian fraud, doesn't it? But it may be an absolutely fantastic blog that has a small but amazingly committed audience, and the content is written by some genius, and he or she writes really well, and so because they write really well, so it's that blog might get the ads on that blog might get as much attention as ads on the Times or the Telegraph or with properly paid journalists who are generating content that's really worth reading. Mm-hmm. Does that answer your question, Andy?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not that small websites are invariably crap. It's that really good content leads to really high engagement with ads. Now, I don't know what good content is, and it's different for different people. So
individual.
I quite like rugby union. Other people like rugby league. Rugby league
some
websites.
Some people like rugby league. Some people are wrong.
Exactly. So the rugby, you have 2 blogs, and they're both good for their audience, and then both blogs will be a complete irrelevance to other people, but it's not for me to say, that's why I'm quite a left-wing sort of person, so I think I use the Guardian as an example, but the Times and the Telegraph, whose politics I probably don't agree with, are still astonishingly good places to put, and the Sun for their audience is a really good place to put the ads as well. So as a savvy marketer
on this podcast, Mike.
But as a savvy marketer, what you want to do is go and where you place your ads is super important, but you need to place your ads next to interesting content. And this, I suppose, is where Tristan Hunt and Zuzana Zuboff have a point about the attention economy. Because the more you engage with the content, the more you do engage with the ads. And there is an ethical dilemma here, because who are we to say what's good content or what's bad content? And it might be, that you and I think that quality journalism is the thing, or movies made by and videos made by talented artists or whatever, or stories about my family, or Christmas dinners or whatever, but equally other people might think that horrible anti-vax content or conspiracy theories that directly harm society is it? Now, it's hard for an advertiser to say, therefore, well, I shouldn't advertise next to that horrible content. It's hard, but it's not impossible, because as an advertiser, you just have to make an ethical decision. The sad fact is that your ads probably will get quite a lot of attention when served next to sort of conspiracy theory stuff. Yeah, and there probably is some negativity about having your ad next to some horrible, Russian propaganda. But let's just be honest, it's probably going to get some attention. That means it's on you to make not a business decision, but an ethical decision, and go, yes, I could make money out of this, but there's more to life than money. Could I look my children in the eye and say that I helped destroy democracy just to sell some more cat food? And
that's an easy call to make. Cat food all the way.
Well, no, but I think it means that you just, I'd love it for the data just to be unambiguous, to say always advertise in good places because that's where, but it isn't. That's why there's a question. And in those moments of ambiguity, that's when, morality comes in, and you go, what sort of person are you? And I think that your listeners should look at themselves in the mirror, because you go, as marketers, I don't know if you read Bob Hoffman's Ad Contrarian blog, but there's lots of, ad tech is in part responsible for the destruction of trust and the erosion of trust within society, because of all of the attention economy stuff that I was just talking about, negatively described. So we then have to make a choice. Do we want to be part of that or not? And some people will make the wrong choice, and we should judge them for that.
No, I like that. Look, I'm just aware of the time, so I want to ask you a couple of questions at the end. I ask everybody about books. Talk to me about what books do you read? You've mentioned Bob Hoffman's Ad Contrarian blog. You've mentioned Mark Ritson, not a book, but we'll get a link to his column up there as well. Where else are you reading now? You're going for your information.
Well, lockdown was quite good because I got to actually, I don't know about your house is like, but my house is like an interesting and well-stocked bookshop full of books I haven't read.
Yeah, completely unmolested books.
So I actually read a load of the books that I bought, and I this summer was quite good. I read. So if you're really interested in attention, there's a historian and legal scholar called Tim Wu. WU or triple U, I suppose, and he wrote a book called The Attention Merchants, which is sort of a history of how newspapers and TV stations have been sort of selling eyeballs for the last 100 years, which I thought was really, really good. A chap called Faris Jacob has written a really interesting. It was produced 2015, but it's sort of really coming real ahead of its time, and his book is called Paid Attention, and that talks about attention not just to things like ads and stuff, but how we use our time, attention in the broadest possible sense, about how we as individuals choose to look at things and choose to spend our time, not just on ads but on anything. But I think that's very good. And then the last thing on the if you're really interested in attention, it is worthwhile. There's a sort of a Pelican sort of popular history, a popular science book by a chap called R.L. Gregory, who was professor of psychology at Bristol University, and it's a sort of introduction to things. It's called Eye and Brain. But what's interesting about that is it does teach you all about the eye and the brain, strangely, which as you'd imagine. But it ends with quite an interesting discussion about like the nature of perception. What is actually happening when we're looking at things? Are we? He talks about all those sort of Escher like sort of visual anomalies. Those sort of visual tricks. And you go, that teaches you something about how we look at the world, and how we actually construct meaning. So I found that's what I read over the summer, and all three of those books made you think, Oh, I wish I'd read this years ago.
Any great book. However,
I've wasted so much time. I should have read this ages ago.
And on all new books that we that haven't been recommended before, so there'll be links to them in the show notes. I actually promised I was going to ask you a quick question about incrementality. Have we got time to ask it before you have to go?
If you like, I'd be very, increment to your podcast.
There was an element when it comes to incrementality. There was a study out a couple of years ago about eBay and how their digital advertising was a complete waste of money.
Yeah.
Which then made it on recently. The Free Economics podcast did a two-part about why advertising doesn't work. And I listened to it. I found it quite a difficult listen, but I was pulling what little hair I have out listening to it. I remember when that eBay study was released, anybody I know in the performance marketing community, and it's not that I don't like them, I just have issues with the way they measure things. But, eBay is the punchline to not a particularly funny joke about how not to do digital advertising.
Yeah.
It's like they were talking about, for every dollar they spend, they hope they'd make $1.30 back. And every ad company I know would be going, well, why would you even bother? I look talking to companies that are doing, well, you give us $1, we'll give you 11 back. That's the sort of metrics they're looking at. And, it's like, oh, who do you do? Nobody would ever stand up and go, we do eBay's advertising, because it's so embarrassingly bad. So to use that one study as an extrapolation that advertising doesn't work, I thought was quite poorly done. But what I think it does come down to, what my question is about paid advertising on your own brand. It's kind of, most PPC agencies will be saying, look, you've got to be there. Brand protection, you've got to pay to be there. But all you're doing is paying to attract clicks for people who are already looking for your brand. Do you have any sort of evidence on that, or any opinions on that, in terms that you say, look, if you're measuring incrementality, that's a sale you were probably going to get anyway?
Well, I mean, the first thing to say is that advertising definitely works. It really does.
But Free Economics did a two-part to say.
Yeah, I know, and I go, and you just think, I listened to that as well, and you go, oh, they're very clever. And he goes, if they've got this wrong, then perhaps they've got everything else wrong. It really eroded my trust in them, rather. But so advertising it probably just doesn't work in the way that we think it works.
Mm-hmm.
I think most ads probably work in terms of just building salience and mental availability. They're not selling through the page, they're not selling through the ads, they're just reminding you that Coca-Cola exists, that Exmo marketing exists. And then having established sort of this, renting some space in your brain so that it even becomes an option, then when people are in a more lean forward work, they go to Google, they do branded search, or they do, or when your brand comes up in a price comparison website, you're more likely to click on the fourth one down rather than the cheapest thing. That's the power of brand. So it's about mental availability rather than selling off the page, I think, in general. And the reason why you can see this is that in the incrementality studies that we do, we see that the ads that get even 2 or 3 seconds of attention, just 2 or 3 seconds of attention, generate significant amounts of sales. You don't need to persuade anyone of this thing. What you need to do in a numbers game like advertising is simply raise awareness. So I do think that PPC marketing works, but it probably works in a way that's different from the way they think it works. What it's probably doing is being there at the right time at the right place, just to tell the customer that this is this is a product, this is a service. So I think probably most PPC advertising is working like brand advertising. It's just bad brand advertising. And that is the and if you look at the numbers from the, I mean, when we do lots of integrations with DSPs to allow people to buy digital advertising, on the basis of how long it's going to get looked at or not, we see that attention is the thing that predicts sales, and that even at very short amounts of attention, sales still go up.
Brilliant stuff. Well, look, Last question then. I have promised last question several times, so this is the third last question, but it will be the last one. No, it's not actually the last one. It's the penultimate question. What question were you expecting me to ask that I haven't?
I am really, really glad. You didn't ask me. I'm really, really glad about. It was about how much has COVID changed everything, and do people look in different ways because of the pandemic? The answer is probably not. Not really, no. I mean, people are obviously on their phones more than ever before, but what COVID has probably done is sort of accelerated trends that were probably there already. But the reason I'm very happy about that is that the broadest thing that I've learned in the last few years is that people don't change very much. And people in general aren't very interested in ads, in general. And people don't look at them for very long. That's a big, deep learning that is going to be, has always been the case and will always be the case. And these little minor blips of COVID and Brexit and I don't know, a mouldy whopper on. God, do you remember that from last year? These things are small fry in comparison to the big eternal truths. So thank you for not asking that one.
No problem at all. And look, my very last question. How do people get hold of you if they want to contact you?
We'll go to our website, lumen-research.com, and get in touch. My email address is mike.follett@lumen-research.com. And we are very much looking forward to helping anyone and everyone about optimizing their creative work and optimizing their media spend.
Brilliant. Mike, thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks very much, Andy.